All right. Welcome everyone to APS Radio number 26. My name is Jim Burneka. I'm with my special guest today, Gregg Bagdade from
Hello, everyone.
Chicagoland. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good. So, Chicago firefighter medic, bagpiper, Beatle maniac, clinician, author of a book, my best James Limpton. We're going to talk about the mental health Mayday that just came out not too long ago. So, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I think mental health is a very important thing to address, and I'm really glad you reached out and we're going to have this conversation.
Absolutely. So, let's back it way up, because you've done so much. I mean, you're my age, a little bit more handsome, but I mean.
I dig the whiskers though.
Oh, that's what happens when everybody retires. You start growing that beard immediately, right?
I need to get my Robin Williams Good Will Hunting beard going when I retire.
Absolutely. That'd be great. So how did you in the first place even become, part of the Chicago Fire Department? Let's start there.
So I'll take you back even further than that if you're okay with that.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Back to the future.
Yes. When I got out of high school, I was a recluse. I was getting in a lot of trouble, and none of it was good. A lot of it involved following the Grateful Dead, and there was a band called Fish that I followed for a while, and I got into some substance abuse, which was not very good. I needed some structure in my life in my late teens and early 20s. And I found a suburban fire department, a volunteer fire department. And I ended up going to them and saying, hey, I'd like to be a firefighter. And I heard about that from a friend who was also going through the fire service. And I said, you're going to be a firefighter? He said, I am a firefighter. I said, that's phenomenal. I can't even imagine. And I said, you must need a lot of college and there's a lot of stuff to do. And he said, no, frankly, it's you take the test and sign up and then you become a paramedic and a firefighter and you're all set. So it really piqued my interest that he was talking about that, because I thought it was pretty super cool. I mean, isn't it super cool to be a firefighter, right?
Absolutely.
So
At least initially.
correct.
Yes.
So I went to the volunteer fire department. It was very bare bones back in the day. It was the Long Grove Fire Protection District. There were still farmers that were in charge and taking care of the fire department, and they took a chance on me. And I had to shave my beard, and at the time I had long hair, and I cut it. Yes, I had the long hair.
I asked Greg to send me some pictures yesterday, and he did not send any of those old ones. They're all very professional, present day type pics.
Yes, I would say that I did have Birkenstocks and long hair. I did let my freak flag fly, that's for sure. So anyway, I went to the Long Grove Fire Department and they took a chance on me, and it was exactly what I needed. I stopped doing drugs, stopped drinking alcohol excessively, and it was the structure that I needed. There were some fine fellow firefighters. One of the names was Mark Gates, and he was my mentor. And it was kind of silly, but he took me through it all. He got me a gym bag and he taught me how to make a bed and do drills. And as I went through my schooling, a lot of the other guys were a big support, and they taught me to be a man. And that was the structure that I needed. So that's where I got my roots from, was from the Long Grove Fire Protection District.
That's awesome.
Yeah, eventually I set my sights higher, and I really wanted to do a lot more. So what I did was the city was calling. The city opened up their list, and as for paramedics, and I don't know if you know this, but in Chicago, we have single role paramedics, which they exclusively do EMS. So they do no firefighting, which is ball busting, and it's very, very hard work. But I really wanted to be a part of something bigger. So I threw caution to the wind and I put my name on the list and I got hired as a paramedic in 2001. Shortly, in 2008, I crossed over and became a Chicago firefighter paramedic, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. So we started, our careers kind of parallel. We started pretty much around the same time, firefighter medic. When you're doing the medic stuff, what schedules, what, 24/72s?
So in Chicago, the EMS is 24 on, 72 off. For fire and suppression, it's 24 on, 48 off.
I imagine that extra day, you really needed that just to recover from the
sure.
beatings, right?
Yeah, oh, there were beatings. Yeah, you went home and you took your lumps, and a lot of times they wave that rehire flag over you, and that's very hard to either take it or not take it. But when you do take it, you come home and you take your lumps and you go to bed.
You called it in your book, you call it blood money.
Yes, for sure. For
And
sure.
that is I love that reference because it's true. Like that, it's, I think of, and I'm not sure if you're still like this now, being a firefighter medic for Chicago, but I know I never said no. I took everything. And later on in my career, I was just like, it's not worth it. I'd rather just be home. I don't need the money. And I'd rather just, the recovery and the family time was more important than me. My priorities changed.
Yes. So in the city, the way they arrange their rehires for the medics, so they work 24 on and they're off for 72 hours. So 1 day on, 3 days off. And what they'll do is they'll give the rehire day on. So if I'm on 1, they'll give the rehire day on 3. So you literally have 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, 24 off, 24 on. So it's very hard. So, and a good portion of that day is spent sleeping.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine. I'm just curious, has there ever been any talk about having the firefighters on a similar schedule?
So that came up, I want to say in 2006, 2007, and the firefighters knocked it down. They did not want to be a part of that schedule.
That's kind of crazy to hear. I mean, I think it works out to where it's about, I think, 9 days less a year working altogether, and just an extra day to recover, do whatever.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses for both. I saw it from being on that schedule, and I thought it would be a great idea. And for whatever reason, the union knocked it down.
All right. So, a lot of firefighters have a second job. Whether profession it may be, whether it's plumber, electrician. You went the clinician route. Where did that come from?
So, right around 2013, actually, I'll take you back even further once again, history lesson. So, in August 9th of 2010, my good friend Chris Wheatley died. He was all of our friends that we all came on at the same time. We all had kids together. We all got married together. We all went out to the bars together. We were all coming up through the fire service together. And it was fun. We all had a good time, and we were loving it. And he was on truck 2 in Greektown in Chicago, and he responded to a restaurant fire, and he ended up falling to his death. And it was devastating. It was absolutely devastating to all of us. And we didn't really know or have any avenues to vent or to go to or to help each other out. There was EAP, but it was very inactive at the time. The union had a program, but that didn't come until later. So there was, what do we do? Where do we go? How do we talk to each other? During this time, a lot of people that I knew wanted to talk, and my wife was, at the time, she was the EMS coordinator of one of the local hospitals. So she knew, she was well embedded into the mix of the fire service, and she knew everybody. And she actually knew Chris before I did. She worked with him in the suburbs when she was doing cardiac care. And people started reaching out to us and saying, hey, can we talk? And we had some people over to our house, and we laughed, we cried, we hugged, and we left. They left. And shortly after, many other people started talking to us and trying to fill the void and deal with the grief. And it was quite sad. Shortly after that, I said to my wife, I said, we need help. We need someone to listen to us. We need someone that knows what's going on at the firehouse, on the calls, afterwards, the social aspects, the everything. And I told her, I said, I want to go back to school. And she said, do it. And she gave me 100% full support. So I didn't even have my bachelor's degree. I went to Illinois State University for 3 semesters, and I had a really good time. I had a wonderful time, but I didn't get very few education credits out of it. So now here I am, an adult learner. I went to Penn State, and the only time I set foot on the campus was when I graduated, because it was all online. So I went to Penn State and took the summer off, and then I went and got my master's degree and then got licensed. I got hooked up with Counseling Center of Arlington Heights. It was ground floor private practice with 2 clinicians, and now it's a sprawling practice of 15 clinicians. And actually we have our own department, which I'm the head of, which is the first responder department, and it's phenomenal. Yeah, so that brings us to today.
So you were, really kind of peer supporting before there was peer support initially, just having everybody come over and just venting and sharing your feelings and frustrations. That's what what I took it as, is just kind of peer support, and you realized you should be able to do this, but do it more formally.
Correct. Peer support, and I mentioned this in my book, is the tourniquet on the arterial bleed. It's necessary. It's wonderful. When a good peer support program is utilized, it's phenomenal. But people slip through the cracks, and it's not enough.
Yes. And I would say a lot of it, I think, what I've realized is just because we're really good actors and actresses. We we could put on a show for 24 hours and leave and become a completely different person when we're off.
Yeah, 100%. We call that in the business, the clinician business, as compartmentalizing. And that's what we do. We compartmentalize it, and we put it in a box, and we put it in our head, and we say, we'll deal with this later. And then we probably don't deal with it. And it may manifest in us as anger. It may manifest to us as a drinking problem. It may manifest to us as violence to our spouse.
All that. You're right. I've seen it myself, I don't think you have to be at a huge department to see that. Just it's everywhere, any department. Now, so you're doing now the firefighter medic stuff. You become a clinician. You do that for a few years, and then you decide, hey, I want to write a book. How did that come about?
So it's really funny, and I have to plug my friend Brett Snow. He's a retired lieutenant from the Chicago Fire
You did a
Department.
lot of the research and development, and
Yeah, he's
yeah,
PhD. He wrote a book as well, but I've kind of followed him. He does the religious aspect of it. He's a minister, and I saw what he was doing and speaking at some of the local symposiums, and I said, that son of a gun's going to write a book about mental health. I should be the one to write the book. So he ended up coming out with a book, and it was a wonderful book, and it was basically about the stories of riding on the West Side as a firefighter. And I wish I think it's called Riding on the West Side, but I do apologize that I don't have the name of it. But his name is Brett Snow. He's phenomenal. But jealousy. I wanted to write that book, so I started writing it, and I'll tell you, Jim, it came out of me like lava. It came out of me like lava. It just came out really quickly. And I'm glad it did. I'm glad it did.
so Brett's book is called "Take a Ride on the West Side: Highlights of a 2-Year Journal."
There you go.
So it just came out with like lava. So when you sat down, I mean, was it just boom, from your head to your fingertips and done? Or I mean, outline? I mean, I'm just curious how it all came about, because it's kind of got this flow to it, and it's really almost this. I mean, it's the story of you in a way, um, that touches on a lot of these different aspects of our job, but it does it in a very um kind of chill, just matter of fact way of how you realize a lot of that stuff through the job.
Well, I would like to say what the name of the book is. It's called Mental Health Mayday, a firefighter's survival guide from recruit through retirement. And what I do is I use 3 voices, and I use myself, my personal voice, I use my firefighter voice, and I use my clinician voice, my counselor voice. And I kind of weave a tapestry throughout the book explaining these things. So I may start off with a little background information on how my childhood was, and then I'll wrap it around talking about something that happens in the fire service, what like camaraderie or something along those lines, and then I'll finish it off by using a counselor voice and wrapping it all up in a nice little package and tying it with a bow.
Yes. So how long did it take you to write the whole thing?
6 to 8 months.
Okay.
So
Nice.
yeah, I did a lot on my days off. I did a lot at the firehouse. Um, Somebody told a good friend of mine, he's a field chief, Jake Dickman. He told me, he said, don't write it as one book. He said, write it as chapters. Each chapter is a story. And that really resonated with me. It made sense. So that's kind of what I did, is each chapter is its own story.
Yeah, no, it really is. It is kind of that, going through rookie school, getting out there in the stations and just working through it. One of the things, and we talked about it the other night, is your love for the Beatles is all over this. Before every chapter, you're doing some kind of quote from one of the Beatles songs or one of their own individual songs, solo songs later on. Where did that come from? The love for the Beatles?
So when I was in 7th grade, my childhood friend Jamie handed me, now we had cassette tapes back then. Remember those?
I do. I had a bunch.
And he handed me Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which is one of the Beatles records that they made in 1967. And I laugh because at the time I was we remember we used to record songs off the radio.
I do.
I think I was recording the Bangles or something silly like that, which there is a place for the Bangles in the discography of life, but it was so much different. And I heard this album and I was literally blown away. Ever since then, I have resonated with the Beatles. I used to go in Chicagoland. We had conventions called Beatlemania. I don't know if it comes by Dayton. And it's just everything Beatles. And I would go to that. And I was also, I used to play in rock and roll bands as playing guitar and bass. And I just envied their je ne sais quoi. It was awesome. They were just so creative and so life-changing, and they changed the face of rock and roll 100%. And it was funny because they started off as this poppy band, who, they Love Me Do, and then they became Rubber Soul came out and they just changed everything.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that they came into their own and they said, we're going to do our own stuff and we're going to change everything. And I do believe that they're the building block of all rock and roll after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I mean, even how, when we talked the other day, you mentioned how there's something for everybody. Like they have such a diverse catalog that covers so many different things. But when you looked at it in your own book and you looked at these chapters, it's very relevant to what you're writing. I mean, quotes like, boy, you're going to carry that weight for a long time. That sounds about right for our job. Help me if you can. I'm feeling down. I do appreciate you being around. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rapping the Beatles. I'm not trying to really actually sing them. I mean, they're all over the place, but it's perfect. Let It Be. Oh my goodness. Just think about the opening of that.
Yeah, for sure. My whole life has been a musical, and if my life is a musical, then the background track is the Beatles 100%.
Yes, and you could do that soundtrack completely of the Beatles, and I love that so much. You got me in the mood. Like I was driving around today. I had to drive to Kentucky, and I just listened to Beatles, and I realized like there's other songs that would have been perfect as well. Like there's just so much there, so much great content. It was a good choice. I really dug it.
It.
I really truly appreciate it. And there's other references in there too that are kind of like pop culture. It's like you mentioned, you threw out the Thundercats in there. There's Ghostbusters, Star Wars. Like I'm reading this and I'm personally going, all right, this Greg's a nerd and I like it. He's a hippie nerd that's into pop culture stuff and movies.
I'm drinking a cup with a Lord of the Rings on it. I don't know if you see that.
Oh, I see it now. Well, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, in the darkness bind them.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And I didn't realize this today too. And I don't know if you can see, but I'm rocking a Blues Brothers shirt.
Of course.
For you. And I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah, that's terrific.
You should tell everybody, like, if they're, oh, you got to mail me something. Okay, it's 1060 West Addison Street.
Yes, there you go, Wrigley Field.
That's right. That is an important question. Are you a Cubs fan or White Sox fan?
So I grew up, my brother is 3 years older than I, and he was a Cubs fan, and I wanted to do everything opposite of him. So I ended up being a Sox fan. So
that's fine.
Yeah, South Side all the way. And I married a girl from the South Side. So her whole family is Sox all the way. And actually a funny story about that is we were in Hawaii. So we got married on Maui in 2004. And we went back a couple years after that. And one of those years happened to be when the Sox were in the World Series. So we ended up belly into the bar every night and watching the daytime actually, and watching the Sox game. And the people we were with are like, "You're in Hawaii. What are you doing? This is ridiculous. You should be going out surfing and whale watching." I said, "The Sox are in the World Series. This is what we're watching." And they said, "Okay."
I do the same for my Reds, but they haven't been in contention or done anything since I was 11. So there's that.
I know it's a they would call it a chick flick, but have you seen Fever Pitch?
Ah, that sounds very familiar.
It's
Just
with Drew Barrymore and
Jimmy Fallon, right?
Jimmy Fallon.
Red Sox. Yeah, it was the Red
Yeah,
Sox. Yeah, that was good. Well, I remember they had to change that because they won.
they won. Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, 100%. That they changed the very end.
Nice. Are you this is so random. Now, are you when you're talking, when you're doing your, being a clinician, like are you referencing any of these pop cultures or any of these movies or anything?
So I wouldn't have a repertoire in my life if it wasn't for Adam Sandler movies. So, I mean, that's 60% of my repertoire is Adam Sandler references. But yeah, if part of being a clinician is being real, it's being developing rapport with your clients. And yeah, are there clients that we can't make these references? 100%. Yeah, we get down to brass tacks, but you can't always make something therapeutic. Sometimes you got to just rap. And some of the things that I like to rap about are the pop culture stuff, you
Yeah,
know.
that's great. So, you started, this rural fire department as volunteer. You became a paramedic, then you got on to Chicago as a medic there, transferred over several years later, firefighter medic, became a clinician. You wrote a book. I got to ask you, like, what's next? Like, I feel like you're the type of guy that always something is going on. Like, I'm always going to be busy, always looking to see what's next. You probably wrote this book, I imagine, and celebrated it for probably 2 days, and then you were like, all right, next project. Am I right or am I wrong?
Um, well, I do have to tell you, I have to give praise to my wife. She kind of fell short because the release of my book was right when she was graduating with her master's program as she's a nurse practitioner. She's actually taking her boards tomorrow. And I got to give props to her because pretty much the week before she graduated with her master's was my book release. And she's like, can you give me just the weekend? Can you give me a little bit of time to celebrate? So unfortunately, that she was pushed by the wayside, but her I do have to give her props. Both my wife and I are very, very motivated people. We've always strived to be better ourselves and continue on with education and make education a priority. And we've instilled that in our kids as well. I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they're both phenomenal students, and in their own right, they're very creative, and we hope that they'll go on and do wonderful things as well. I don't see myself staying any longer in the Chicago Fire Department longer than 2026, and that'll put my daughter outside of high school. So she'll graduate high school. So then she's my youngest. With my wife as a nurse practitioner and me as a counselor, we have intents of moving out of state and moving out west. I'd like to pick up residency and start anew. Pick up start with a private practice and work with first responders out west.
Nice. That sounds great. Um, a lot of first responders move once they retire, and I feel like a lot of it is they just are ready for a change of scenery, and that probably. And I'm not. I know you don't live in the city, right?
So all city employees, police and fire, and teachers have to live in Chicago proper. So we
Okay.
have a residency
Do
requirement.
you? Okay. Forgive me. I'm sorry about that. So, do you feel like that's part of it? Is you've seen so much just stuff? Is part of it just I want to get away? I don't want to be reminded of bad memories wherever I go.
100%, 100%. And Chicago is it's not the trajectory of Chicago is not going in the right direction. And when we first moved here, it was a lot safer than it is now. Carjackings are up, violent crimes are up. But on top of that is we're in the thick of it. We're in the bad neighborhoods where we work. My wife was at Mount Sinai Hospital, which was a trauma center in the city, and we just saw a lot of bad stuff. Yeah, it would be really
It's a
refreshing
fresh
to,
start.
yeah, to move somewhere else.
I've tried to explain that kind of to my wife, and she gets it, but we got little kids still, and we've got lots of family around here. So doing that great escape is not as easy as it sounds, unfortunately. At least for me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and it's like taking off a band-aid. I mean, it's a let's get let's get out of Dodge. Let's go.
Yeah.
I told my wife, I said, I'm keeping you here for 20 plus years. We're gonna go wherever you want to go. And she chose Arizona. So we're most likely gonna end up in Arizona.
I love Sedona.
Sedona's magical.
Yeah. Yep. If I had a choice, that's probably where I'd end up. Somewhere around there.
Well, maybe our paths will cross.
Just have a spare bedroom for me.
There you go.
That's
I
all.
just learned that they call them a casita. I just learned that yesterday.
Nice.
Yeah. It's like a little we call them a mother-in-law in Chicago. It's like a little separate area.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I skipped ahead. I do want to go back. So you go to school, you become a clinician. How was that received throughout your department?
So my people of my whole life have always talked to me. They've always gravitated to sharing stuff with me. It's just, I don't know if it's because I'm an extrovert. I don't know if I'm a good listener, probably a combination of the two, but people would come to me and talk to me. When I first started my practice, I'm sure most firehouses across the nation are the same, but after dinner, we all go to the apparatus floor or sit outside in front of with the bay doors open and drink a cup of coffee or tea, and rap about the world. And that's where it all began. People started talking to me, and shortly they would open up to me. And at the end of it all, I would hand them my card and say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm a therapist. And if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm there for you. And of course, I wouldn't out them. Confidentiality is, I wouldn't have a business if it wasn't for confidentiality. I have to make that a premium in my business and my life. Because I work with a lot of these people. I may see them at the next firehouse. I may see them at a fire. And it's very inappropriate to talk about what we talk about there. And I would always say to them when they left my office, if someone finds out that you're here, it's not because of me. And that buy-in is huge. It's huge. And it's one of the main reasons, because, you know, the stigma, we have that huge stigma that you're not allowed to go seek help. And although it's breaking down, which I'm really grateful for, especially within the last couple of years, I think it's wonderful. But just sitting and waiting in the wings and kind of letting people come to me and talk. And you know, I've had times where guys or gals they'll put their toe into the water and they'll say, "So you're a therapist, huh?" And I'll say, "Yep, I sure am." And then they'll walk out of the room. And then they'll come back in and they'll say, "Oh, you wrote a book, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's on Amazon if you want to check it out. I have one here if you want to check it out." "Yeah, let me take a look." And then I'll walk out of the room and they're reading it. And then after dinner, "Hey, so I got this problem that I'm dealing with. Can I bend your ear?" "Sure, let's talk about it." And that model it's worked. It's worked tenfold. And now it's to the point where at my practice, and I have a director that's phenomenal, Tammy Nowak. She's phenomenal, and she's allowed me to grow this practice as large as I want it to be. So I told her, I said, "I want an intern. I want somebody to learn the basics and come up through this." So we got an intern. I said, "Well, now I need a seasoned clinician," and she said, "Bam, you get a seasoned clinician." So now we're a team of 3 right now. The practice covers everything. It covers addiction, it covers family, it covers children, adolescents, but our little division is growing exponentially, and I'm very proud of it.
It's awesome. Well, let me ask you this. You've been doing this job, firefighter, paramedic, over 20 years. So you've got your own stuff, your own history. Plus now you're also getting all this vicarious or secondary just from listening to all these other responders. How do you deal with things? How have you been able to cope with just everything that you end up listening to?
So although confidentiality is in place, but I do lean on my wife, and I don't share any of my information with about that, but I do talk about my emotions with her. And she's able, since she's in the business, she's able to give me the support that I need. Also, we have weekly supervision at my office. So we all get on, we do a Zoom session, and we talk about caseloads and how we're feeling and how we're handling it. And that's weekly, with people in the business, and it's nice. It's a good support, and I'm really happy that's available. My director, I've gone to a couple times for sessions to process some of the information that I have. While I was writing my book, I was really stressed out and I was having some issues. I forget exactly what it was. It doesn't really matter. And then we had a shooting in the city. My engine responded to a shooting. It was on Halloween, and there were 8 to 10 people that were shot. Now, I've seen this scenario probably a dozen times, but this one affected me. And that's kind of how the business works. It doesn't affect you until it affects you. And I called up my director and I'm like, "Hey, I'm really struggling. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm trying to write this book and I'm dealing with this caseload, and I had this shooting." And she stopped and she said, "Hey, tell me about the shooting. Did you ever process the shooting?" And I said, "No, it's fine, Tammy. It's fine. I do this all the time." She said, "Process the shooting with me." And I called her up and we talked, and we actually fleshed out what happened, how I was feeling, how I felt that the call went. And afterwards, I felt like $1,000,000. So it was really nice to have that support that's built into my practice that allows me to do that.
Well, and I liked how she picked up on it and wasn't going to just let you go.
So that's the interesting thing is in the fire service, it may not affect you right away. It may not affect you your whole career, but one day it may affect you. And I know you read my book, and I know you remember the firefighter that it did affect. I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the story was I was on the ambulance and we responded to a rape victim, and the medic on the engine was a seasoned he was a firefighter's firefighter. He was phenomenal. I've known him for decades, and he was stone cold, man. And he was wonderful, great teacher to me too. He basically said, he said to me, I want to ride along with. So he rode along with, and it affected him. It affected him tremendously about this girl. And he held her hand and he took her to the hospital. And afterwards, he said to me, I said, what happened with this girl? Why did you respond the way you did? And he said, it was her socks. She had Mickey Mouse socks on, and that's what my daughter had. So it can affect people at any moment at all. And that was it for him, was the Mickey Mouse socks.
Yeah. No, I remember that. That's just, again, more powerful stuff. Wow. Well, Gregg, I can't thank you enough for making time for me to share your story, to share your book, everything with all my viewers and listeners out there. One more time, Mental Health Mayday, a firefighter survival guide from recruit through retirement.
Yes.
You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on barnesandnoble.com, and it's published by MSI Press.
Perfect. All right. Well, hey, thank you again so much for writing this. So everybody has, almost a guidebook now, really, start to finish, of what you're probably going to be dealing with. And if you don't deal with it throughout your career, that's awesome. But by reading this, you're at least going to be aware of kind of what to do afterwards. This is kind of the playbook that you wrote. I mean, that's kind of probably why you wrote it, right?
For sure. The way I look at it, it's the primer for any firefighter or paramedic that's getting on, or is in the job, or is thinking about retirement and what to do. The last thing I wanted to say was, a lot of literature out there gives awareness for what to do in most situations, but I do feel that I give solutions to those situations.
That's right. This may be the problem, but this is how to handle the problem. And I think you did that really, really well in this book.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get out of here. He's Gregg. I'm Jim. And we're out of time this one until he writes the sequel. It's
Until
probably
next.
next. Until next time. All right.